Hello and welcome to an unofficial Shifted Lands LARP guide, episode 107. In this video, we will briefly introduce the concepts of advanced paths and dive into the 14 different paths. When you wish to further develop your character within Shifted Lands, you are essentially given two options: become an elder of your race and follow a pathway, or stay at your base racials and become what is known as a racial augment. In episode 106, we covered all the different augments and the unique augment elder skills that come with them, with the opportunity cost of not becoming an elder of your chosen race. For those who wish to become an elder and dive deeper into their racial roleplay, there is a pathway of progression that does not involve augmenting. These are known as advanced pathways, or paths for short. Each path is deliberately unique and seeks to fit a fundamental fantasy archetype, such as the Ranger or Warlock, or even, for example, the Elementalist. There are 14 paths, which gives you a wide range of determining the skill set you would like to develop with your character. Typically, but not always, a path is associated with one of the four unique upper pools that are fundamental to the game, these being Adept, Rogue, Wizardry, and Avatar. However, there are additional paths that have unique requirements that do not necessarily require the attainment of upper pools to progress in the given path. However, you'll find that it is recommended to have obtained at least one upper pool before picking a pathway. This inherently means that the entry-level build requirements to go down a pathway are much less than an augment. Augments requiring at least 200 points of pool and typically skills and racials in addition to that. You'll find that while augmenting is a very powerful choice that gives you unique general skills, pathways essentially take an individual pool or archetype to a rather specialized route. In effect, pathways are very good at doing a few things very well, to the point that they might outshine an augment in a given task. However, augments are, in general, a strong choice across all the given hierarchies that they interact with in terms of skills. This has been an Introduction to Pathways, episode 107, and we will now begin the unscripted section by diving into the first pathway, Bard. Alright, so we'll hop straight into Advanced Path Bard. I was around when Bard became a advanced path. Bard is super cool, and it's very interesting because none of the effects that they have are specifically magic, which means they work on anybody, including Nullifidians. Oh yeah, so I love Bards. And there was specifically one character that really helped bring Bard into the rulebook, essentially. There was kind of this idea of having a research-based pathway, and Bard is kind of that, exactly. Uh, so we haven't talked a whole lot about research yet, but research is this sub-mechanic that allows people to learn skills that aren't being taught to them, so they can self-learn certain skills within the rulebook through the use of research. So typically, some people will pick up like 10 or 20 research to be able to learn their own skills, and you also need research to teach other people skills, essentially. Um, so people who are very well developed will typically pick up research for the purpose of looking into alchemies or researching artisan stuff or teaching. There's a bunch of reasons why you would pick up a little bit of research. And so Bard is somebody that picks up a lot of research. And they're very unique in that Bard doesn't require you to be part of an upper pool, to have access to an upper pool. You only need 100 earn build, 20 research, and the skill seasoned professional, which is a scholarly skill, I believe, and it involves there's a profession system in terms of like I want to be a chef or I want to be a fisherman or I want to be a bodyguard. Um, and not pathway bodyguard, but like my job is to be a bodyguard, right? And that gives you like coin on your upkeep at logistics. And seasoned professional, I think, is the furthest you can go down one of those trees. So it's not something that requires you to have uppers. So this is, I believe, this is one of the few pathways that specifically doesn't require that you have uppers to use it. Um, I believe these costs are, if we look at the specials and like 1 research, but if we look at these 5 research, 10 research, all of these skills here are used with research instead of an upper pool, which is very unique for a pathway. And it's cool that we get to start out with Bard. Um, like I said earlier, I was playing actively when Bard became a thing, and I got to watch it happen. And Bard is a really cool pathway, honestly. Like, it's super dope. Bards are awesome, and they are essentially, in mechanical terms, they are AoE buff givers. They give AoE buffs to people around them. And I know if you haven't played an MMO or World of Warcraft or an RPG that has those type of sayings, that it can be kind of hard to catch this. But essentially, bards help everybody around them just by being a bard, which is super awesome. So we're going to drop right into performance, which is the first bard skill, and bard gains plot approved performance. So there's nothing that stops you from putting on like a show, right? Like say you want to play acoustic guitar, there's nothing that says you can't bring in your acoustic guitar and role play as like knowing guitar. But bard gains plot approved performances in a mechanical sense. Um, let's see. You must have, so basically this is laying out the requirements of the actual pathway. The bard gains the ability to get paid to perform for others, maybe. Um, Nobody actually has to pay you to do these things, but the idea is that you want to play a character that performs for other people, is an artistic expression, and you can get paid for these. There's no mechanical thing that says you can't play a guitar and get paid for for doing that. But it's just in the rules for Bard was very much a personal thing with this individual character that created Bard, or like helped develop it. So when you're reading through Bard, we're gonna see a lot of references to that particular character, and this is more or less this sentence is just kind of an inside joke. You don't have to worry about it too much. Uh, the performance type must be martial approved. So you can't come in with fireworks and start lighting off fireworks and call it a performance, essentially. Um, so you have to, and performance is very much a plot approved, martial approved interpretation. So if your performance is reading a story, or your performance is singing, singing is very much encouraged and is like typically what a lot of the bards will do. Um, and it does not require instruments, but your performance could be you're playing an instrument, you're performing a special dance, and it's very much an intricate thing. There's not I'm doing a generic, I'm beating a drum and that's it, you know. uh, so performances have to be martial approved, and they have to, but that is not very limiting. So let's see. It is possible for a bard to have multiple performance types. Examples include singing, playing an instrument, dancing, acting, telling a story, painting, etc. There have been NPC bards that were like lore givers. Like they were people that were very studied and they carried around large books and they read stories and told lore, and that was their performances, right? That was what their performance was. So bard is very much open to interpretation, but you definitely want to have a martial approval before you start saying that, like, yeah, this is my performance and that's what's going to mechanically allow these skills to happen. um, a bard's performance may allow others to gain benefit. In order for others to gain the effect of the bard's influence, the bard must perform for at least 1 minute, so a 1 minute performance. Anyone within 10 feet of the bard present during the entire duration of the performance will gain the effect. So you don't just get to jump in the last 10 seconds of the performance. You have to be actively watching the performance for the effects to work. This effect will not stack with other abilities of the same type from the same bard. However, the target may benefit from multiple bards. Uh, from multiple bards. So if a bard performs and then a different bard performs the same thing, those skills will stack. However, they don't stack if they're the same. So a bard can't do the same performance like 10 times in a row and give everybody the same buff 10 times, right? Makes sense. It's really just there to make sure that you're not like abusing anything. Again, spirit of the rules. The entire performance must be completed outside of combat. So at least for the generic starting performance, it is outside of combat. There are certain things that they can do during combat that I know of. Uh, but for basically this is something that you do. Bards are somebody that performs in like the tavern before you go out on an adventure. So they'll sing an inspiring song of courage to these adventurers before they go out, and they'll get some buffs before they go out to an adventure. That's the kind of the idea of what bard is doing. You can pick up a lot about what a given pathway is by really looking at their individual skills. In bard, it's very clear what it does. Effects gained in this manner will remain dormant until combat is initiated unless otherwise specified. Hereafter, instances of performance are subject to the guidelines of this specific ability for purposes of the bard's effects on others. Okay. So, and it costs 0 build, and it gives you 0 body, right? So you're picking this up, and this is the first pathway skill of bard, and you're picking it up for 0 build. So you just have to be at the requirements, and you have to pick up the build, or you have to pick up the skill. Which is very much why like this individual skill itself doesn't particularly say that it does anything. It just allows you to mechanically perform. There's no individual like benefit from just performing. Right. So we'll go into inspiring aura. Bard can give minor buffs to his allies. Special cost. After a performance, the bard will call Song of Inspiration or Song of Aggression. Song of Inspiration costs 5 research and causes the target to gain plus 3 damage to all weapon or claw strikes for the combat duration. So initially, there was this spell called Bless. I don't know if it's still around because I play an Ophidian and I don't care about spells. There's this spell called Bless that gave you plus 5 damage when you entered combat for that combat duration. And I think it got nerfed to plus 3. And so this is essentially just giving you a plus 3 Bless for 5 research to anybody. But the thing is that you're spending 5 research and you're giving it to X amount of people that watched your performance, right? So you can spend 5 research and theoretically give 10 people plus 3, right? Like the theoretical ceiling of Bard is actually kind of nuts. It's super cool. Song of Aggression is a 10 research and grants plus 2 strength and plus 20 body for combat duration. So there's a couple goblinoids and I think minotaurs get a similar effect where it's plus a little bit of body and plus a little bit of strength. So you're just doing that. But again, you're potentially giving this to like upwards of 10. I mean, the floor is like one other person, right? Like one other person watched you perform. I think bards are also recipients of their own stuff too, so you also give it to yourself. But the floor of this is like you and your buddy, and the ceiling of this is like however many people watched you perform, which can be nuts. So giving plus 2 strength and 20 body across 10 people, you're handing out 20 times 10. I gotta do basic math on a calculator so I don't look at 200. So you're potentially giving out, like, if there's 10 people watching you, 200 body. That's like nuts, right? For 10 research. That's actually like the ceiling here is nuts. But yeah, so that was the first skill. That in and of itself is super cool. And obviously Bard is just filled to the brim with roleplay, by the way. Like in case if you didn't catch that, role playing is like hand in hand with Bard. So we'll go to Song of Courage, 1 research. Song of after a performance, the bard will call Song of Courage or Song of Celerity. Song of Courage costs 1 research and causes the target to gain plus 25 armor for combat duration. So you're spending 1 research and giving like 10. I'm just going to keep using 10 as like the base example. You're giving 10 people 25 armor combat for combat duration? Nuts. Now, granted, you don't have 25 armor until you enter combat. It's when you enter combat that you get the 25 armor as per the performance skill. Or, and this is the really cool one, 25 research and you grant 1 dodge per combat duration. So, if you watched the augment video for Eldritch Trickster, you'll have caught that they can do like kind of a lightning reflexes that gives them like 3 dodges, a 3 dodge pool for combat duration. This is similar, but it gets only 1 dodge and it costs 25 research. But you give it to like 10 people and you paid 25 research to give 10 dodges out theoretically. This is nuts, okay? This is like really good. Now, granted, 25 research is a lot of pool. That's a lot of research. Somebody spent 25 build into research to be able to give you just a single dodge. But still really good. So the more people that watch a bard, the more effective the bard becomes, essentially. So yeah, really good skill. It's only 1 build too. A lot of these are pretty cheap for bard specifically. So student of the Bardic College, 10 build, 5.0, 5 body, and a special unique cost. The bard can recall information on a topic. So, I'm just going to read through this real quick with you. The bard may spend research on the fly to recall some information about a topic. The bard might choose to do this in order to impress a prospective mate, gain popularity with an unruly band of orcs in order to avoid being eaten, or in a less likely scenario, help others. Again, inside joke, if you know the character, this is quite silly and funny. And Bard is very much comedic as much as it is performance-based. You know, Bards are funny. If you think this also encapsulates the jester archetype. If you think of fantasy archetypes, this also includes the jester underneath it. It's not just the bard, right? You can interpret it in multiple ways. This may be done only when a plot marshal is nearby and if the plot marshal is interested in what the bard has to say. So, just like how mistwalking, if you followed some of the videos, we've talked about mistwalking and how a plot marshal has to be like, yes, the mists are available for this. So essentially, you ask bards questions because bards know things, okay? You just assume that bards know things. And if the mists, quote unquote, or in this case a plot marshal, is available, they will give you a plot answer, an answer straight from plot. So bards, while the character or the individual playing the character might not know the answer to a question, they have the skill, if a plot marshal is around, to ask that question to a plot marshal and eventually get an actual answer, depending on how much research they spend. So it's a special cost, but this could be like 5 research or 50 research if you really wanted to know the answer. Which a lot of my videos have been covering a lot of the mechanical stuff, like really set in the rule book. This costs X amount of build to get this effect, right? This is so not associated with that kind of understanding of a skill. This skill you cannot evaluate in a given, like in an X equals Y. You cannot evaluate the skill in a mathematical sense because the theoretical value of knowing the answer to a given question is absolutely nuts. A lot of this LARP is really cool because of this understanding of this thing called FOIG. Find out in game. FOING. Or FOIG. Find out in game. Right? You have to figure the things out for yourself. It is by design that way. So Bard, student of the Bardic College, inherently interacts with that understanding of the game where you get to specifically ask questions to plot marshals in a in-game way, which is super cool. And this skill is absolutely bonkers, honestly. If not every person would want this skill, but I would pick up this skill if I could. If it wasn't like you have to be a certain pathway. This skill is awesome and sweet. Uh, this may only be done when the plot marshal is nearby, and if the plot marshal is interested in what the bard has to say. This, after this comma here, this is kind of just like another inside joke. But the bard may ask the plot marshal a question and tell them the amount of research they are spending. Based on the amount of research and the bard's familiarity with the topic, the plot marshal will determine the fact to brew ratio of the information the bard is able to recall. Super cool ability. Uh, yeah, very unique. It's the most expensive ability here because it is certainly the best ability here, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is the best ability that bards have. In terms of like evaluating. I mean, this is nuts theoretically. Like theoretically, 25 research and you grant like if dodge is 10 pool, so 10 build to dodge, right? And you're paying 25 to give maybe 10 dodges, like the build to dodge ratio there is nuts. Right. So theoretically this is also kind of busted, but this is awesome. I would have this skill if I could. Charismatic Charm. Bard can cast Innate Inflict Friendship spell. This ability may be purchased up to 10 times for 5 build. So they're bards, they're charismatic, they're friendly, and they can cast the friendship spell innately, which also means that if they're muted for some reason, because you might be tempted to ever mute a bard, and we'll get into that later. But if they're muted, they can still be friends with you, is what this kind of means. That, and they get a cast a friendship spell for free, essentially, for a racial ability. Or functions like a racial ability. Alright. So, cool skill. If I was a bard, I would pick this up once. Honestly, there's not very many times where you're going to do this. But this also goes into the diplomatic side of bard. Bard, like if you're thinking of a diplomatic pathway, bard is the closest to that as well. There's not a dedicated like. So if you're thinking of like civil servant or like helping people or being researched and lore based and stuff, like bard encompasses a ton, or being a jester, bard encompasses a ton of those archetypes. And so like this is a representation of the diplomatic archetype here. Bard, the show must go on. Bard is immune to mute and silence effects regardless of type. There is not a possible way to mute or silence a bard, which is quite funny. So you can't make the bards shut up. You can't make the jester shut up. This is a very interesting skill. There's no, I almost guarantee you there's no other immune to mute or silence skills in the game or in the LARP. At least that I can see in the rulebook. There is not any immune to mute or immune to silence effects. So this is very unique. It's 3 build, pretty solid skill, and it's very in character for a bard to not be able to be muted. It's very funny. Bard can extend combat duration effects. So far, Friendship spell and this skill are the only ones that you could theoretically use in combat that we've seen so far. Upon activation of this skill, the Bard may extend all combat duration effects for his companions. The Bard must call "Here we go again" or a similar half-hearted inspirational chant and begin to perform. He must then pay a cost of 1 research for each minute of performance. So, if you followed the augment videos and you looked at Reaver cares about a unique adept skill called Dance of the Adept, which gives you plus 50 damage for combat duration, right? So if you finish killing all the guys in front of you and there's no combat, then the combat drops, okay? And that means that if you walk 10 feet in one direction and encounter combat again, then you're having to cast or activate Dance of the Adept again, and that's like 10 Adept or something silly like that. So you're spending like more Adept. Bard Continued Inspiration allows you to extend combat duration effects for the people around you at the cost of 1 research per minute, and you have to be performing or like singing as you go along. This is a very good skill, okay? For 5 build, you get to give, so theoretically, again, Bard is helping out the people around them by being by saving them pool theoretically, in an understanding of you're not having to cast dance again because you have your original dance that you casted, or Snake's Revenge, insert combat duration effect here, essentially. It saves people pool by not having to make them recast their skills. During the performance, all combat duration effects on affected targets are sustained. Immediately upon the end of the bard's performance or upon leaving the effect radius, all combat duration effects on the target continue to count down where they previously left off. So combat duration is defined further in the rulebook. It's somewhere under like maybe general skills or something, where combat duration is you killed the last guy and then you have a minute to enter combat again. So theoretically, if you have Dance of the Adept going and you kill all the guys in front of you and you sprint ahead and run into more guys within 1 minute, your combat duration is still up. So this is very much for when you're sustaining longer than a minute people's combat duration stuff, which inherently synergizes with his first song skill, the +3 damage, the +20 strength, +2 body, Song of Courage, and Song of Celerity as well. Like all of these things, he's synergizing himself with just this skill, which is actually dope. I'm pretty sure also, I haven't read anything yet here that says otherwise, but I'm pretty sure you can do a minute performance, and then if you spend all the costs, so you do your performance, you dance, you sing, whatever, and then you call Song of Inspiration, Song of Aggression spending 15, and then Song of Courage, Song of Celerity spending 26, right? Like at the end of the call, so you go like Song of blah blah blah. You say all 4 of the songs afterwards. I'm pretty sure you can do it all with one performance. Is my understanding. I don't think it's an individual performance for each of these skills, which is another convenient thing to understand. That it's like a single 1 minute performance, and you can potentially activate all of these skills. Very important to know. So yeah, Continued Inspiration, super sweet. It is not possible for the same combat duration to be affected by Continued Inspiration by the same bard. So this only works for one adventurous travel. So if you, again, in the theoretical example, you're in a cave, you fight bad guys, you kill all the bad guys, and then you run 10 feet down the cave, and then there's another set of bad guys. If you kill those bad guys, and then there's another set of bad guys another 10 feet down the cave, this individual bard cannot extend that further than the first time. I think is what this is explaining. It is not possible for the same combat duration effect to be affected by Continued Inspiration by the same bard. Immediately upon the end of the bard's turn, upon leaving the effect radius, all combat durations continue to count down where they previously left off. Yeah. So if there was theoretically though, if there was 2 bards, they could extend it further, like for each given one. All right. Vanity. Bard can buff themselves. By spending 1 research per song performed, the bard may affect their own performances. Oh, okay. So yeah, so it wasn't in the songs or in the performance skill. It might even be in the performance skill where it says that bards aren't affected. It only works for others, and then when you learn Vanity, you get to spend 1 research for each song to be affected by your own stuff. So that means you can spend 25 research to give yourself a dodge and give yourself 25 armor, etc. Right? Pretty dope. Being able to affect yourself is pretty important. And so, like, all of these skills, short of innate friendship, are like directly helping other people. Like there's not like a bard does not exist in a vacuum, essentially. It's very important to understand. A bard exists with a party of people. And then we're gonna see a we're gonna see a unique skill. This costs 0 build, and it does have a valid effect of throwing unnatural inflict friendship. Where this is typical of pathways. And so there used to be only a couple of pathways, and the pathways on the rule book used to be mostly hidden. So you could see some of the skills, but you couldn't see all of the skills. And when you learned the last ability of a given pathway, it was called a cookie. It was the extra cookie that you got at the end for finishing a pathway. If you think of like why people call things brownie points and stuff, it's very similar to that. So in effect, this is the cookie, and every single pathway has a cookie at the end of it. I don't know if they're all zero build or not, but for zero build, Bard, where everybody knows your name, you can now innately cast an unnatural inflict friendship. In addition, the Bard may use 2 or more songs in the time. Oh, okay, yeah. So when I talked about earlier about being able to activate all of the songs for a single activation, this is what the cookie lets you do. Because I was coming from my understanding of seeing it happen, because I've seen the bards do that, and I assumed that was part of the regular ruling, but it's actually this skill that allows them to do that. In addition, the bard may use 2 or more songs in the time it takes to do one. The bard must pay the activation cost for all the songs, plus 1 research per additional song past the first. Cool. Yeah. So that was Bard. Entertainers, historians, and sages can harness their talents to become bards. Uh, those who listen long enough to a bard will find themselves more formidable in combat. A pretty good summary of what bard is. They are sages, historians, singers, actors. They have a passion for the people around them, and they typically perform at the best of their skill that they can. And they're very cool, and they're very unique in terms of a pathway that does not require a full upper pool to be able to learn, which is super cool. All right, that was Bard. We're going to move on to Blackguard next. Thank you for watching.